This is the 7th video in the Introduction to Simio module, and in this video we'll focus on the single topic of success tips, where we'll try to provide some information for you based on our experience in modeling with Simio. In terms of the success tips, and these success tips come from the cumulative experience of the people teaching the course and the people at Simio who have spent years developing the product and also providing services with the product. First of all, understand the stakeholder and the project objectives. So the stakeholder is the person who commissions, funds, or is affected by the simulation project. So for a consultant, this is the person or the group that hires you. For someone within a company, this is essentially your boss or the group that you're doing the work for. And these are the people who are impacted by the simulation. Also realize there's no single simulation model for a system. So I have students who ask me all the time, is this model right? Or is this the right model? Well, there is no right model. The model that you develop depends significantly on a combination of the system that you're modeling and the particular objectives that you're trying to achieve. So I'm trying to develop a model that estimates throughput. A model that estimates number and system perfectly is of little value, right? I need to have the model that meets the objectives. And so in terms of what we need to do for the objectives, we need to know, what do you want to evaluate? What do you learn? What do you hope to prove? What's the scope of the project? Also, what data are available to be collected? And in what form do you want the results? So all of these things come under the notion of working with the stakeholder. We're also I strongly recommend that you develop something called a functional specification. So a functional specification is a document that describes exactly what will be delivered, when it will be delivered, how it will be delivered, and who will do the delivery. So the basic question, if you think about it, is, well, how long will this project take? And of course, we always have Dilbert to turn to, and I will let you read the Dilbert. But the impetus here, or the main idea, is if you don't understand what exactly you want to do, then it's impossible to predict how long the model will take. So it's important to have this information during the planning stages before you even think about starting to develop a model. So at its basic level, for most models that you'll develop, the functional specification should include at least the specific objectives, the system description and the modeling approach that you plan to take, any input data that's required in order to start the project, the expected experimentation, in other words, what results are you is the project expected to deliver, and then what are the specific deliverables? Are you delivering a report? Are you delivering a presentation? Are you delivering models? What is actually being delivered? From practical experience, we think about 5 to 10% of the project's total time should be spent on developing the objectives and functional specification. And so while this might seem like a large amount of time, it's critically important to be able to guide the development of the simulation. And so you have to have the functional specification, including objectives, correct in order to be able to continue with the model development. So a simulation project, when you think about the tasks involved, these are the basic tasks. First of all, define the objectives, understand the system being modeled, determine the modeling scope and level of detail, data collection, building a model, note that this is an iterative process, verify the model logic and data, validate the results, design and execute experiments, analyze the results, and document and present the results. And so we have a very similar flowchart view that we have from the Simio and Simulation textbook. And so the basic flowchart says, set the objectives, determine stakeholders, develop functional specification, prototype. Note that we have a iteration between here. So based on a prototype, you go back to the stakeholders and you might alter the functional specification. Once we're satisfied with our prototype, we can initiate a model building process, collect any required input data that we don't already have, go through a validation and verification step. Also note that after this, we might go back and rebuild the model or go back and make model changes to support the validation and verification. We might also go back to the prototype and say, okay, we need to change something in order to be able to meet our objectives, which might in turn lead to going back to the stakeholders to modify the objectives. Once we finish the validation and verification stage, we go down through the experimentation stage and the report resulting stage. And this little feedback, the dash feedback, basically based on the report results, we might go back and set further objectives, develop additional experimentation, secondary projects as such based on the reported results. One other thing we want to mention before we talk about some of the other things that we can do is as follows. So in general, simulation novices will start modeling and keep adding material to the model until it's finished and then run the model. This is a very bad way to do modeling. A much more effective method is to use an iterative model building process where I check and verify and run the model every time I add features of any substance. So I add a feature, I run it, I add a feature, I run it, I add a feature and run it, and all the while I'm monitoring how the model is performing. Because if you implement all of the features before running it, it's virtually impossible to go back and find errors, and if you were getting unexpected results, to trace those down. Or if you follow an iterative design and development process, you can immediately see errors in many cases. And then finally, the typical save early, save often. You want to make sure and have copies of your model, because in any model of any size, you will definitely go down the wrong path multiple times and you will want to be able to backtrack. So you need to have a mechanism to do that backtracking. So again, save early, save often. So some common pitfalls that we see in simulation modeling, first of all and most importantly, is not understanding the purpose up front. So why are you built? Why is the model being built? If you don't know why the model is being built, then you can't build an effective model other than getting lucky. Models or systems are too big and too complex for the scope. So either the funding amount or the allowed time doesn't support building the model of the size or complexity. Not fully accounting for variability, as we saw in our the impact of variability video. Variability is the thing that impacts models almost certainly the most of any other component, and so accounting for that is critically important. Obtaining the necessary data. So people always, or companies and people and departments always say they have tons of data. In general, they don't always have tons of data, and the data they have is often not in the right format or in the right level of granularity, and so that can cause problems. Failure to verify and validate the model, really important. We'll talk more about verification and validation later. And those steps are important to be able to have confidence in any of the results that you get. Incorrectly interpreting random results. This goes back to not fully accounting for variability. When we have variability in our model, then the results also exhibit variability and randomness, and understanding how to interpret that randomness is very important. And finally, untimely results. If you don't finish the model on time, then perhaps the results are not particularly useful, or decisions already have to have been made, and so the model, even though the results might be accurate and might be quality results, they're not useful for the decision making for which the project was originally commissioned. And so that completes this video in the Introduction to Simio series.